You think you know what love is, don't you? That warm feeling, that romantic attachment, that desperate need for another person that makes you feel complete. But what if I told you that what you call love is actually the most sophisticated form of psychological control ever devised? What if your deepest desires, the ones you think make you most human, most free, are precisely what keep you enslaved? Slavoj Žižek, the wild-haired Slovenian philosopher who spits while he speaks and thinks while the world burns, has spent decades revealing a truth so disturbing that most people can't bear to hear it. Your desire is not your own. It never was. And what you mistake for love is actually the engine of your own oppression. Žižek understood something that destroys every comfortable assumption about human psychology. Ideology doesn't work by prohibiting your desires. It works by commanding them. The system doesn't tell you don't desire. It tells you you must desire. And here's what you must desire. Your love, your passion, your deepest longings aren't escapes from the machine of control. They are the machine of control. Think about it. When did you last make a choice about what you find attractive? When did you decide what kind of person would make your heart race? You didn't. Those desires were installed in you through years of cultural programming, advertising imagery, romantic comedies, porn, social media feeds that taught you not just what to want, but how to want it. Žižek calls this the obscene supplement of ideology. The official ideology tells you to be a good citizen, work hard, follow the rules. But underneath, it whispers. Go ahead, transgress a little, buy things you can't afford, have affairs, watch porn, rebel just enough to feel free. This transgression isn't resistance to the system. It's how the system maintains itself. Your rebellion is pre-approved. Your desires are pre-packaged. Your love is algorithmic. This is why modern dating apps are so perfectly designed to create addiction rather than connection. They don't want you to find love. They want you to keep swiping, keep searching, keep consuming the endless promise of love that never quite arrives. The apps have gamified desire itself, turning your deepest human need for connection into a slot machine that pays out just enough to keep you pulling the lever. But here's the truly perverse part. The system makes you feel guilty for being lonely while simultaneously ensuring your loneliness. It tells you that if you can't find love, it's because you're not trying hard enough, not optimizing yourself enough, not worthy enough. Your failure to connect becomes evidence of your personal inadequacy rather than systemic design. Žižek reveals that romantic love under capitalism isn't about finding another person. It's about consuming them. The beloved becomes an object that will finally complete you, fill the void, make you whole. But this fantasy of completion through the other is exactly what prevents genuine love from ever emerging. Look at how we talk about relationships. Finding your other half, soulmates, the one. All of these metaphors treat love as a consumer choice, where the right product will solve all your problems. Dating becomes shopping, relationships become acquisition, marriage becomes a merger between two personal brands. This consumerist ideology infiltrates every aspect of romantic life. You don't just love someone, you invest in the relationship. You don't work through conflicts. You upgrade to someone better. You don't grow together. You optimize each other for maximum personal satisfaction. The other person becomes a lifestyle accessory, a validation machine, a mirror that reflects your best self back to you. Social media amplifies this commodification exponentially. Your relationship isn't just between you and another person. It's a public performance designed to generate likes, comments, and envy. You don't experience love. You document it, post it, brand it. The relationship exists as much for its audience as for its participants. This performative dimension of modern love reveals something crucial. You're not really loving another person. You're loving the image of yourself as someone who is loved. The beloved becomes a prop in your personal mythology, evidence that you're desirable, successful, complete. This is why so many relationships collapse under the weight of expectation. They're asked to bear not just love, but the entire burden of personal fulfillment and social validation. Here's where Žižek's analysis becomes truly disturbing. He shows that what we call normal desire is actually deeply perverted. Not in a sexual sense, but in a psychological sense. It's twisted away from its own object towards something else entirely. You think you desire the other person, but actually you desire your own desire. You're turned on not by them, but by the fantasy of being turned on by them. You love not them, but the idea of yourself as someone capable of love. This is why so much of modern romance feels hollow, performative, like you're going through the motions of feelings you don't quite feel. Dating apps reveal this perversion with scientific precision. You're not swiping through potential partners. You're swiping through fantasy projections. Each profile is a carefully curated fiction designed to trigger your desire for desire. The real person behind the profile is irrelevant. What matters is whether their image can sustain your fantasy of romantic fulfillment. This extends far beyond romantic love into every area of desire under capitalism. You don't want the product. You want the feeling of wanting the product. Advertising doesn't sell you things. It sells you the experience of desiring things. The actual consumption is always disappointing compared to the anticipation of consumption. Žižek identifies this as the fundamental perversion of consumer capitalism. It has separated desire from its object and made desire itself the commodity. You're not buying a car. You're buying the fantasy of being the kind of person who drives that car. You're not choosing a partner. You're choosing the fantasy of being the kind of person who deserves that partner. Traditional psychoanalysis says the superego is the internalized voice of authority that tells you what you shouldn't do. But Žižek reveals that under late capitalism, the superego has become perverted. Instead of prohibiting enjoyment, it commands it. The superego doesn't say, "Don't enjoy." It says, "You must enjoy." This creates a new form of anxiety, the anxiety of not enjoying enough. You feel guilty not for transgressing, but for not transgressing enough. You worry not that you're too hedonistic, but that you're not hedonistic enough. The system doesn't punish you for having fun. It punishes you for not having enough fun. Look at how this operates in modern relationships. The pressure isn't to be monogamous and restrained. The pressure is to be sexually adventurous, emotionally available, constantly growing and evolving. You're supposed to have amazing sex, deep communication, shared adventures, individual growth, and perfect compatibility. The relationship must be not just functional, but optimal, not just satisfying, but transformative. This imperative to enjoy creates its own form of totalitarianism. You're not free to not enjoy. You're commanded to extract maximum pleasure from every experience. Your relationship must be your best friend, your sexual partner, your emotional support system, your adventure companion, your growth catalyst, and your spiritual teacher all rolled into one. No human relationship can bear this weight of expectation. The result is what Žižek calls depressive hedonism. You're surrounded by opportunities for pleasure, but increasingly incapable of enjoying them. Every experience feels contaminated by the awareness that you should be enjoying it more, that others are enjoying similar experiences more, that you're failing to optimize your pleasure correctly. Žižek's most crucial insight is that ideology works through fantasy, not reality. The system doesn't need you to believe in it consciously. It needs you to maintain unconscious fantasies that make the system tolerable. Your romantic fantasies aren't escapes from capitalism. They're what make capitalism psychologically sustainable. The fantasy of romantic love serves as what Žižek calls a phantasmatic screen that allows you to ignore the brutality of the economic system. As long as you believe that true love is possible, that somewhere out there is someone who will make everything meaningful, you can tolerate jobs that crush your soul, cities that alienate your body, and a political system that ignores your voice. This is why romantic comedies are such perfect ideological instruments. They don't need to convince you that capitalism is good. They just need to convince you that love transcends material conditions, that a good relationship can overcome economic anxiety, social isolation, and existential meaninglessness. That personal fulfillment through romantic love is not just possible, but inevitable if you're worthy enough. But here's the perverse twist. The system simultaneously promotes this fantasy while making it impossible to realize. It tells you that love conquers all while organizing society in ways that make genuine connection increasingly difficult. It promises romantic fulfillment while destroying the social conditions that make deep relationships possible. The result is a population of people desperately seeking in personal relationships what can only be found in collective transformation: meaning, purpose, community, security, hope. When relationships inevitably fail to provide these things, the failure is individualized rather than recognized as systemic. Žižek shows that the most effective way to neutralize political resistance is not through repression, but through the promise of personal fulfillment. Why revolt against an unjust system when you might find happiness through the right relationship? Why organize for collective change when individual optimization might solve your problems? The ideology of romantic love serves as a massive displacement of political energy into personal channels. All the passion, commitment, hope, and faith that might otherwise be directed towards social transformation gets channeled into the search for the one. Revolution becomes dating. Political organizing becomes relationship optimization. Collective solidarity becomes couples therapy. This displacement is so complete that most people can't even imagine fulfillment outside of romantic partnership. Single people are treated as incomplete, failed, tragic figures who haven't yet found their missing half. The possibility that happiness might come through friendship, community, creative work, or political engagement is barely acknowledged. Dating apps accelerate this political pacification by turning the search for connection into a full-time job. The endless swiping, messaging, optimizing, and hoping consumes enormous amounts of time and emotional energy that might otherwise be directed toward political action. The apps keep you busy searching for individual solutions to collective problems. The most insidious aspect of this displacement is that it's voluntary. No one forces you to prioritize romantic love over political engagement. The ideology makes you want to. You genuinely believe that finding the right partner is more important than fighting for systemic change, because you've internalized the fantasy that personal relationships can provide what only social transformation can deliver. In one of his most famous examples, Žižek discusses the toilet seat dialectic to illustrate how ideology operates through the most mundane domestic details. The argument about whether the toilet seat should be left up or down isn't really about toilet seats. It's about power, recognition, care, and the gender dynamics that structure domestic life under patriarchy. This seemingly trivial dispute reveals how ideological battles are fought not through grand political speeches, but through everyday practices that establish who matters, whose needs count, whose comfort is prioritized. The toilet seat becomes a battleground for much larger questions about equality, consideration, and domestic labor. Žižek uses this example to show how romantic relationships become the sites where all the tensions and contradictions of the larger social system get played out in miniature. Your relationship isn't a refuge from political conflict. It's where political conflict gets personalized, privatized, and rendered seemingly resolvable through individual negotiation. This is why so many couples fight about money, housework, time management, and social obligations without ever addressing the economic and social systems that create these pressures. The problems are systemic, but the solutions are expected to be personal. The relationship becomes a shock absorber for social dysfunction, asked to compensate for what the larger society fails to provide. The result is that relationships are constantly overloaded with significance and responsibility they can't possibly bear. They're expected to provide not just love and companionship, but economic security, social identity, emotional fulfillment, sexual satisfaction, intellectual stimulation, and spiritual meaning. No wonder so many collapse under the weight. Žižek reveals that every ideology has an obscene underside, unofficial practices that contradict the official values but actually make the system function. The obscene underside of romantic love ideology is the massive infrastructure of casual sex, pornography, dating apps, and hookup culture that coexists with the fantasy of monogamous commitment. The system simultaneously promotes romantic love as the highest ideal while creating conditions that make it nearly impossible to achieve. Dating apps promise connection while designing addiction. Porn promises sexual satisfaction while training users for dissatisfaction with real partners. Hookup culture promises freedom while creating emotional numbness. This isn't a contradiction in the system. It's how the system works. The official ideology of romantic love creates the guilt and longing that drives consumption of its obscene underside. You feel bad about casual sex because you should want committed love. You feel bad about committed love because you should be sexually adventurous. The guilt goes both ways, keeping you constantly consuming products and services designed to resolve the unresolvable tension. Social media amplifies this obscene underside by making it visible and competitive. You see not just successful relationships, but successful single life. Not just romantic fulfillment, but sexual adventure. Not just commitment, but freedom. Every choice feels like a loss. Every path not taken a source of anxiety. The grass is always greener because the algorithms make sure you see all the grass you're not touching. In psychoanalytic terms, mental health isn't achieved by fulfilling your fantasies, but by recognizing their function and choosing to relate to them differently. Žižek calls this traversing the fundamental fantasy, the moment when you stop being driven by unconscious desires and start choosing consciously how to relate to your own psychology. Applied to romantic love, this means recognizing that your desires aren't natural facts about your psychology, but learned responses to cultural programming. The person you find attractive, the relationship style you prefer, the expectations you bring to love, all of these can be examined, questioned, and potentially changed. This doesn't mean becoming unfeeling or cynical about love. It means becoming conscious of the ideological forces that shape your emotional life and choosing how to respond to them. Instead of being driven by desires you don't understand toward goals that may not serve you, you can develop what Žižek calls authentic desire. Wanting that emerges from genuine self-knowledge rather than cultural programming. Traversing the fundamental fantasy of romantic love means giving up the expectation that another person will complete you, save you, or solve your existential problems. It means accepting that you are already complete, not because you're perfect, but because completeness isn't something that can be provided by external sources. This shift allows for what Žižek calls authentic love, care for another person that doesn't depend on what they provide for you. Instead of loving someone because they make you feel good about yourself, you love them for who they are, independent of their utility to your self-image or emotional needs. So here's the truth that Žižek spends his career articulating through clouds of cigarette smoke and torrents of saliva. What you call love is mostly narcissism disguised as care for another. Your romantic desires aren't expressions of your deepest self. They're the most sophisticated forms of social control ever devised. The very emotions you think make you most human are precisely what keep you most enslaved. But recognizing this isn't cause for despair. It's the beginning of authentic freedom. When you stop expecting romantic love to solve problems it can't solve, you become available for both genuine love and genuine politics. When you stop trying to find in another person what can only be found through collective transformation, you can actually see other people clearly for the first time. Real love isn't about finding someone who completes you. It's about loving someone while remaining complete yourself. It's not about merging into romantic unity. It's about maintaining distinctness while choosing connection. It's not about fulfilling fantasies. It's about creating something new together that neither person could achieve alone. This kind of love is actually subversive to the system because it can't be commodified, can't be optimized, can't be turned into content for social media consumption. It exists for its own sake rather than as a solution to other problems. It doesn't promise to make you happy. It simply is, regardless of its effects on your personal satisfaction. Žižek's ultimate insight is that authentic love requires giving up the fantasy of love, surrendering the expectation that romantic attachment will provide meaning, security, and identity. Only when you stop using love as a drug to numb existential anxiety can you actually love someone else, rather than your projection of what they represent. This is why genuine love is so rare, and why the ideology of romantic love is so persistent. Most people would rather remain trapped in familiar fantasies than risk the uncertainty of authentic encounter. They prefer the comfortable cage of programmed desire to the terrifying freedom of conscious choice. But some people make the leap. They traverse the fundamental fantasy and discover what Žižek calls the authentic act, action that emerges from genuine choice rather than unconscious compulsion. In love, this means choosing to care for another person, not because you have to, not because they complete you, but because you freely choose to. The revolution isn't just political, it's psychological. It begins when you stop being driven by desires you don't understand toward goals that don't serve you. It begins when you recognize that your deepest feelings might not be your own and choose to relate to them consciously rather than unconsciously. Žižek offers no easy answers, no simple solutions, no therapeutic techniques for achieving authentic love. He offers only the disturbing truth that everything you think you know about your own desires might be wrong, and the possibility that recognizing this wrongness might be the beginning of genuine freedom. The choice is yours. Remain comfortable in your chains, or risk the uncertainty of authentic desire. Your love life and your political life hangs in the balance.